Hello, today I'm reviewing the Lian Li Cases A3, which is a 26.3 litre micro ATX case. It comes in both black and white and has an MSRP of less than $70. But should this be your next case, let's take a closer look. We've got mesh panels on the side of the case. These can simply be pulled out from the top and lifted away. There is an optional tempered glass side panel, which is an MSRP of $12.99. We've got a mesh panel on the top of the case. To remove it, there's two captive thumb screws at the back. Once these have been loosened, we can pull the panel backwards and lift up and away. On the bottom of the case, we've got a magnetically attached dust filter. And we're not going to have any airflow at the front of the case because the front panel is solid. It's removed by simply pulling it off from the front. Taking a look at our front I/O, we've got two USB Type A ports, a power button, a separate headphone and microphone jack, and a single Type C port. On the side of the case, we've got a fan stroke radiator bracket, and this can accommodate up to three 120 or two 140mm fans, or up to a 360mm radiator. The fan and radiator support at the top of the case is exactly the same, while at the bottom of the case the fan support is the same up to three 120 or two 140mm fans, although you are limited to a 240 or 280mm radiator. At the rear of the case, it's up to a single 120mm fan. The case is compatible with micro ATX motherboards, and if you want to go with the CPR killer, the maximum height supported is 165mm. So while these specs sound really impressive for a case of this size, it is important to remember these are only the maximum support at each of these locations, and the major factor that's going to influence what you can put at each of these locations is your power supply. Out of the box, your power supply mount is attached to the front of the case, and it will accommodate SFX, SFXL or ATX power supplies. And you can actually fit really large ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 220mm. Lian Li do recommend using SFX or SFXL power supplies, and if you want to use an ATX power supply, they do recommend trying to keep it less than 140mm in length to avoid compatibility issues with other hardware, particularly your graphics card. It is possible to adjust the height of the power supply on that front bracket, and there is 4 different heights you can install your power supply in. The advantage of moving your power supply down is going to increase compatibility above it, and you're going to need to move it right down to the bottom slot to fit a standard 360mm AIO above it. The downside of moving the power supply down is it is going to be encroaching into your GPU area, where it is going to limit the length of your GPU. The maximum length of graphics card supported is up to 415mm, but that is obviously with an SFX power supply installed all the way at the top of the case. Lian Li do have a table which explains the graphics card compatibility depending on the type of power supply you've installed, where you installed it, and the height you've installed it at. Another option that you have is the ability to mount a full-sized ATX power supply on the drive bracket. This will turn your power supply sideways, which should help improve your GPU compatibility. It is possible to move the power supply over to the side of the case, and again here you've got 4 different heights for mounting your power supply. Main reason for moving it over to here is going to give you the full compatibility of the side bracket. With the power supply mounted at the front, the maximum support on the side bracket is up to two 140mm fans or up to a 280mm radiator, but moving the power supply to the side means you can fit a 360mm radiator or up to 3 120mm fans. The downside of moving your power supply to the side bracket, it is going to significantly limit your GPU length. You'll see out of the box on the side of the case we've got a drive mounting bracket where you can mount up to 2.5 inch drives. This is swappable with your power supply bracket, and you're able to move this bracket to the front of the case if you want to install your power supply on the side. We've got another drive mounting slot on the bottom of the case, and here you can mount either a 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drive. In terms of graphics card support, we've got 4 horizontal PCI expansion slot brackets at the back of the case. One important thing to remember, if you do want to install standard 25mm thick fans below the graphics card, the maximum thickness for your graphics card is 61mm. If your graphics card is thicker than that, you may have to use slim fans. And because you can fit such large graphics cards in the case, Lian Li want to make sure it's well supported, and they do include a magnetically attached GPU support bracket. Another option that Lian Li offer for this case is a vertical GPU mount. First step in installing this is to replace the standard PCI expansion slot brackets with a solid bracket which has a rubber grommet in it. And the idea behind this is you're going to pass your DisplayPort or HDMI cables through this grommet to your graphics card in the main body of the case. The vertical bracket is then mounted to the bottom of the case, and you can slide this along to a number of different positions, moving it further towards the back or further towards the middle of the case. And the big advantage of this, if you mount your power supply on the side, it doesn't interfere with your graphics card, meaning you've got loads of space for both your power supply and your graphics card. The downside of installing your graphics card like this, it is going to block most of your motherboard, so you're not going to see your AIO. The big problem in this case is that the side panel is made from mesh, so you're not going to be able to get a great view of it looking through the mesh. And if you do put the optional tempered glass panel on and you go with a large graphics card like I have, it's going to be right up against the glass, so it's not going to be a good idea for large air-cooled cards. So what I want to do now is give you a closer look at the build I put together in the case. Taking a look at the temperatures, our i9-4900K being cooled by a 280mm AIO at the top of the case set to exhaust, idled at 34 degrees and reached a maximum of 102 degrees during the 10min/64 stability test. During that test there was up to 11% thermal throttling. The Aorus Master RTX 4070 idled at 30 degrees and reached a maximum of 53 degrees during the stability test. Swapping the mesh side panel for the optional tempered glass panel, the only changes were that our CPU and GPU idled 1 degree hotter and there was 2 decibels less noise under load. So moving on to my experience of building in the case, and that started with the planning before the build, and I find this incredibly confusing. When you've got a massive table of all the different configurations that significantly affect your GPU compatibility depending on where you put your power supply, the type of power supply and the height that you've installed it at, it was actually really confusing deciding what sort of build I wanted to do. And actually when I turned the camera on to record this video, I had no idea what hardware I was actually putting into the case. I have done a full step-by-step build guide where I've tried out all the different options and hopefully things are clearer. Some of the things like mounting your power supply on the side, the ATX offset bracket, the half slot positions, I did find quite confusing, but that video I've gone through all that and that is now clearer in my head. So hopefully following that video you should be able to decide in advance how you want to lay out your hardware. I did run into a few issues with hardware that should have been supported according to the manual but actually wasn't, and the major issue I had was trying to mount a 280mm AIO at the top. So the first issue I got in with mounting the 280mm AIO at the top was that it was really difficult to get into place with the power supply installed. So if you are installing your AIO at the top, make sure you install it before you install your power supply. Once I'd moved the power supply to the side, I still had further issues because the AIO was really difficult to slide in past the power supply extension cable, meaning I had to install it quite far towards the front of the case. There was quite a bit of pressure on the screws at the top, but when I did manage to get it installed and look down, I did find that it was actually squashing the fan and ARGB cables at the top of the case, and there was no way to actually leave those cables plugged into the headers at the top of the case. The other issue I had was with the cable length. I did use an SFX power supply because I wanted to get the most compatibility in terms of my graphics card. And the other big issue with a full-sized ATX power supply was you're going to have loads of cables in the case. And because there's no back compartment to manage all your cables, you don't want any excess cables on display. The issue with the SFX power supply that I used was the case was actually a little bit too big for it, particularly the EPS cable reaching across to the back of the case, and in the end I needed to use a short cable extension for it. The other cable that looked a little bit untidy was the 24-pin cable. I had to leave it running straight across to the power supply rather than routing it down at a better angle. The other thing that I tried to do to simplify the build was go with straightforward hardware that's easy to install. I have a lovely AIO from Lian Li which would look great in this case. Two reasons I didn't install it. The first was we're going to have a mesh panel on the side, so we're not really going to see a great review of it. And the second is I wanted to keep the minimum amount of hardware in the case because there's no back compartment. So I was trying to avoid using hubs that you're going to have to plug fans into, extra USB cables for features that we weren't really going to be able to see. So moving on to the things I liked about the case, and the first thing I liked about this case is the price. With an MSRP of less than $70, you're getting incredible value for money because the build quality of this case and the compatibility that you can support in it is absolutely brilliant. The other thing I like about the case is I think it's actually a pretty good looking case. One thing that surprised me was you can actually see quite a bit of your build through the mesh panel on the side, and having the ARGB on the fans at the top actually lit up the build really well. And the other thing that I really like about this case is the options that it comes with. While you are limited to a micro ATX motherboard, you can go with an air cooler or an AIO. There's a number of different positions for mounting a full 360mm AIO. You can go with SFX or ATX power supplies, and you can fit a really large graphics card in the case. The only difficulty is trying to do all of those things at once. And once you've put any large component into it, it's going to significantly limit the other components or the places that you can put things. So moving on to the things I didn't like about the case, and probably the biggest thing I didn't like about this case was the build experience. It was an absolute nightmare before the build to actually decide what I could put into it and what would be compatible. And while Lian Li did give you that really long list, it was really confusing until you got a feel for how this case worked. The compatibility depended on what power supply you used, what bracket you used, whether you used an offset bracket, whether you mounted the power supply on the front or the side, which of the different heights you mounted it in, and that all determined the other components in the case, including your cooling on each of the brackets and the different positions you can put that in, your graphics card, whether you could have fans above or below it. It was incredibly confusing to actually pick out what you were going to do with this build. For me, it was fine. I had a shelf full of parts and I tried this, tried that, and some things that actually should have fitted didn't fit, and I was able to swap one 280mm AIO out that didn't fit for another that did. But I imagine the average user isn't going to have a shelf full of parts, and my worry would be that you would actually pick out the parts you wanted and actually struggle then to get them all to fit. The other big thing that I wasn't a fan of was the fact that there was no back compartment in this case to hide all your cables. So it did influence the decisions I made. I didn't go for the fancy IO with a screen on it because that was going to bring a hub, lots of extra cables into the build that were going to be difficult to hide out of the way. And again, the power supply issues that we had, whether we went for the bigger power supply with the longer cables or the SFX power supply where the cables were too short and we needed to use cable extensions. So another thing that I really struggled with was coming up with a cooling configuration that I thought would actually work really well in this case. And when you hear the cooling support of it, you think this should be really easy. But the big problem is the front panel of this case is solid, so it really limits where you can actually bring air in from. With a larger graphics card like this, I wasn't able to fit standard fans below it, and I didn't want to go down the slim fan route. They'd be so close to the graphics card, they don't actually help, and in some other cases I found they actually hurt your temperatures, and all they would do is blow the hot air up from the graphics card into the AIO, so that wasn't going to be a good idea. With the front panel being solid, the only other source of active airflow was the rear of the case. I did reverse this fan round, having it set to intake, but it wasn't a great configuration because the back of the case isn't filtered, and this wouldn't be something that I would like to run long term. There is an option, of course, to put your radiator on the side, and Lian Li do recommend having this set to exhaust. Downside of doing that is you're going to have lots of hot air blowing out all over your desk, and it's not a pleasant experience to be sitting beside that PC. You could have it set to intake on the side and have it then exhausted out the top of the case. That is probably a configuration that does make a little bit more sense. Downsides of doing that are that then you've got your AIO blocking your build and you can't actually see into it. So we now reached the stage of the review around to tell you, should you go out and pick up this case? And I think that really depends how you want to build in it. If you're going with difficult to cool hardware, absolutely trying to maximize the biggest graphics card and the most radiators and fans that you can fit in it, I can't recommend this case. It was an absolute nightmare to build in. And the biggest question just comes, why would you do this? I can understand for mini ITX systems why people do this. It's not something I'm a big fan of, trying to squeeze all these components into a small case on your desk. Downsides is the cooling isn't good, and the other big issue is if you want to troubleshoot something, it's a pain in the ass to do because you're trying to have to move radiators out of the way. You can't plug things in easily and make changes to it, and it's not something I like doing. The problem with this is you get all the problems of those mini ITX builds because what Lian Li and DIMM cases have done is they've made the case bigger, but they've just increased what you can put in it. So you've got all the same problems, but you have none of the advantages because you still have quite a large case on your desk. So where I do think this case makes sense is if you're not going for a particularly high-end build. If you go with more moderately sized hardware, you're not going to have to worry so much about all those configuration problems that I did, and you'll probably have a reasonably good build experience. Now, I do imagine I'm probably giving a slightly different review of this case than what every other reviewer is doing, but this is just my honest opinion of having built in this case. I like big cases, they're easy to build in, and you can hide all the cables and controllers and bits away at the back. I don't like having them on display in the case. I just did not enjoy at all the build in this case. And I come to the end of it and I go, why? Because I've still got a reasonably large PC on my desk, and I would just have a much easier build experience building in a compact mid-tower. So not one for me, but it may well be one for you. If you are thinking of doing a build in this case, I have done a full build guide, which really simplifies all those different compatibility issues. So if you are wanting to do that, make sure you check out that video and I'll put a link to it in the description. If you have enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.